Thank you, Dale. Good morning, brethren.
Good morning.
Brethren, we are at that time again when we ought to be preparing for the advent of the holy days. And so this morning, as we approach these days, I think it's appropriate that we revisit the scriptures to ascertain, as the Bible says, whether we're in the faith or not. And we are also commanded in 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 28 that let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup, referring to the Passover. But we also have another command to make radical changes in our lives. And let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and let's read verse 6. It says, your glorying is not good. Know you not that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Purge out therefore, verse 7, the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you are unleavened, or as your homes are unleavened. For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast of unleavened bread, not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Now, as I said before, the days of unleavened bread are not about eating bread. It is about us purging what Paul refers to here as the old leaven, the sinful attitudes, behaviors, everything that was sinful about us, putting these things away. So the question, brethren, have we taken action to do as the Bible says between last year and this year, to purge out the old leaven that's within us? Can you list anything about yourself that you have purged out, put away? And if someone were to ask others, that they can say, yes, I don't see this anymore. Have we done that? And the question is, brethren, if we haven't, then again the question is, why not? Because this is a commandment. Because if we don't purge out the old leaven, then you remain sinful. If you remain sinful, then it means you're not repenting. And if you don't repent, then the penalty is death. You see, brethren, we still have locked in our heads that the Ten Commandments is it, and everything else is not as important. But this is a command. Purge out the old leaven. So if we fail to purge out the old leaven, then we continue our lives with sin. And if we continue our lives with sin and not make an attempt to purge the old leaven out, then we become, in God's sight, unprofitable. So today we want to examine ourselves. If you have not examined yourself, we will look at a few things to see how we measure up to those things. But let us get back into the explanation that Paul gave here about the old leaven. Now, what Paul was doing here is he was using the elements of the days of unleavened bread to make a spiritual point. So when he says to purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, he's taking the literal how we make bread. We have leaven that we put in the bread. And how much leaven does it take to leaven a lump of bread, a lump of dough? You have 5 pounds of flour for argument's sake. How much leaven does it take? A little leaven, maybe 1 pack of yeast, 1 tablespoonful of baking soda will leaven 5 pounds of dough. So he's using that physical reality to make a point. In the same way that a little leaven will leaven the whole mass. If you have sin within you, even if you think it is a little one, or how small or how few you think you have, a little bit of sin will leaven the whole lump. So if you have a little bit of sin, it doesn't matter. All of you will become leavened as a consequence. So therefore, in order for you not to be sinful or considered sinful, you have to purge out the leaven. And as he says, you know, not with the leaven of malice and wickedness, which represents the old you, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth, which represents Christ. Christ is the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. And this is what he is now telling us we should now become like Christ. So that there is a period that we have to go through, and he said examine. He didn't say just take a peek. He says examine. When you examine, you spend time, you look at it closely to see what flaws there might be in something. You spend time doing it. And if we're doing it in ourselves, how much time have we spent looking at these flaws? And as I say, if we don't think we have any, just ask other people, and they can readily identify them for us. So that we can't get away with that excuse, but I think, if you think, then as I said, is what you have done, can you ask someone? Or can you write on a list the things that you have put away during the last year, since the last days of unleavened bread? And can someone, if I ask, someone else would I ask, can that person say, yes, I don't see that anymore? That is what it takes, because in the same manner, unleavened bread has a very distinctive quality about it. First of all, it isn't fluffed up like leavened bread. It is heavier, and when you eat it, you know you're eating unleavened bread. It is not as soft. So that it is very physically evident that this is unleavened bread. And that is what we must become. It must be physically evident that we have changed. That we have put the old leaven out of ourselves and out of our lives. So that whatever it is we think we may have put away, that is how we should now appear to others after we have put it away. We are now appearing to be unleavened. And therefore the persons or whoever else must not see those qualities in us anymore. Because, brethren, the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth that represents Christ is what we must now begin to reflect. Christ had no sin. And therefore, if we are reflecting Christ within ourselves, then we cannot be displaying, as he says, the qualities of malice and wickedness. Now he considers the old practices, the old you, and he likens it to the leaven, the leaven of malice and wickedness. And he calls it leaven because if you have these things, as he says, a little bit of them would make the whole lump. So that if you have a little bit of malice and wickedness, it matters not. To God, you are totally corrupted as a consequence. So he's using the concept of the leaven. So neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, because these internal qualities will defile us and make us unacceptable. And so we have to move from that and become now, as he says, a new lump. Now, if we do not, brethren, remove these sinful attitudes and behaviors, as he says, the leaven of malice and wickedness, we cannot be a new lump. And if we're not a new lump, then we're failing to grasp what these days are intended to portray. It is not about eating bread. Eating bread tells us and it gives us some examples. It demonstrates something to us. But it is not about eating the bread. It is putting the sin out of our lives. So that to the extent that we remove them, then we begin to see the changes that it wants. Now let's look at Ephesians chapter 4. And we'll come back to this again. Ephesians chapter 4. And let's look at verse 24. Verse 23 says, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And 24, and that you put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. And then he goes on to explain, wherefore, verse 25, putting away lying, the leaven of malice and wickedness. Speak every man truth with his neighbor, the leavened bread of sincerity and truth. For we are members one of another. And he goes on, be you angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. Let him that stole steal no more, the leaven of malice and wickedness. But rather, let him labor, working with his hands, the thing which is good, the leaven of sincerity and truth. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, the leaven of malice and wickedness. But that which is good, to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers, the leaven of sincerity and truth. And grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby you are sealed unto the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, again, the leaven of malice and wickedness, and wrath, and anger, and clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you. All these, brethren, represent the leaven of malice and wickedness. So this is why he's telling that, let not that be found in you. With all malice, and be you kind to one another, the leaven of sincerity and truth. Tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. As I said, we will come back to this verse in a while. But you see the point that Paul is making. You want to put certain things away from you because they are ungodly. And if we retain them, then we cannot become unleavened. We cannot become the new lump that Paul once is advocating that we become. So that his command to purge out the old leaven is as binding and as weighty as thou shalt not commit adultery and thou shalt not steal. It is as weighty. Because if we don't remove these things, then they will rear their ugly heads again and again and again. And the question is, brethren, how long will we permit them to rear their heads and still believe that we're in the truth? Now, as I said before, the old leaven has a double meaning to it. It represents the ungodly attitudes and the spirit that we had when we were in the world, as they said, when we were the children of wrath. That's on one level. It also, in the physical sense now, it represents leaven that has lost its potency. And so if you take leaven that has lost its potency and you put it in bread, the bread will not get puffed up. Now, is that acceptable? Let's for argument's sake say, we put leaven in bread and the bread isn't puffed up. Can we say that we're eating unleavened bread during the days of unleavened bread if we did that? No. The point is this, there is still leaven in it. But the bread appears to be unleavened. But it is deceptive, because the bread still does have leaven. So even if it looks like unleavened bread, it still has leaven in it. And that's the point he is getting at. You don't want any leaven at all. And the deceptiveness of leaven that has lost its potency is that it looks like unleavened bread, and therefore you don't feel any motivation to get rid of it. And at the spiritual level, you come to church, you fast, you pray, you do Bible study, and you believe that this is acceptable to God, and therefore we don't make an attempt to remove the leaven. But God says, no, that isn't good. You must have the leaven of sincerity and truth, the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. The words, brethren, for sincerity means, it's elikrinia, and it means clearness or purity. And it comes from a root, elikrines, meaning judged by sunlight, tested as pure. Tested, so that there is nothing deceptive there. It is tested by sunlight. You can see everything about it. There is no darkness in it. And that is what we are to become. Because as I like to say, I wouldn't turn to my favorite scripture today, but I will remind us, brethren, now are we the sons of God, or the children of God. And the children of God must reflect God. It says in God there is no shadow of turning, there is no variableness. And the imagery, the shadow of turning is that how the earth turns. Part is dark and part is light. God doesn't have that. There is no part of God that is dark. God is total light. Like he said, there is no shadow of turning. So the earth turns half dark, half bright. And so, that is not how God is. God doesn't want us to be that way, because we are the children of God. And if we're the children of God, then we must begin to think and reflect and act like God, which is what these days are intended to demonstrate to us. So that when we come to these days, that is the focus that we must have. That is, after the days are gone, that is the focus we must maintain. Because the command is to purge out. And as we say in the vernacular, you know what a purge does. The literal thing here is prune, to cut off, that you clip in gardening. But you want to get rid of these things so that they don't remain part of you. So that after the days are gone, they rear their heads again. He doesn't want that, because you haven't purged it up. So the command is to purge it out, so that next year when you return, you're different. You're not the same. You want to be a new lamb. You're not totally new because you don't remove everything at once. But if you remove 2 things, next year you're a new lamb. You're lacking, you have removed 2 things. And if the next year you remove another 1 or another 2, or how many you decide to work on, you are becoming a new lamb every year. And the command is to be a new lamb. Be is, as they say in the language, the peremptory. You must do it. And it has the implication to be, meaning you're staying that way. Not that you flip-flop, be a new lamb. Not, that you're on the process, but to be. And when you be, you stay fixed. And that is the idea that he has, and that is what the language is intending to impart to us. And so, brethren, as the days come that we get into the Passover and then the days of unleavened bread, we go through the Passover and we renew the covenant with God, and we know the background of the Passover, how the Israelites were removed out of slavery, and slavery is likened to a type of sin. They were removed from it. So that we want to be removed from sin with the Passover. And then in the Christian context, and we will get into that on another occasion, but in the Christian context, the Passover is more than just that. It is the time when God wipes our sins away. Now, look at what it took to wipe our sins away. It took the death of a God being to have our sins wiped away. So that after he would have gone through all of that to wipe our sins away, how do we then come back and put the same things back on ourselves again and back on him? Because it is his sacrifice that has to be applied every time. So that if we take it in a literal sense, if somebody keeps doing the same thing and you got to go back and do a whole lengthy process and then comes back and does it, it gets wearing to you. So let's extend our minds to what it does to God. Because we perhaps don't share the same perspective on sin that God has. But sin is really anathema to God. Sin to God is like Ebola is to us. You don't ever want that to come close to you. So that for God to get down there every time to wipe away our sins, while this is what he wants to do, he really wants to see us making the transition from being these beings who are laden with sin to ones who have now become conscious and are actively now looking to put sin away from them. So this is, as Paul says, to be a new lump of dough, a dough that has no leaven in it at all. And so he uses these things to give us the concept that he wants to have us be aware of. Now, what about some of the things that perhaps we could be looking at if we haven't done it ourselves? If we're still in Ephesians 4, let us go back and look at verse, let's look at verse 31. And he says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking. So he has 1, 2, 3, 4 things that he says be put away from you. And then he adds a 5, with all malice. And then he gives us a prescription, what we should be cultivating. And be you kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. Let's look at some of these things in detail. Let's look at the positive things that he says we should put on. He says, be you kind to one another. The word kind is Christos, C-H-R-E-S-T-O-S. And it says, meaning in manner or morals, you must be good, gracious, and kind. Now, have we reflected these qualities? Good, gracious, easy, kind. Have we reflected this in our interaction with one another? Because he says, be you kind to one another. Have you been kind to one another? Or have we offended one another and perhaps not bothered with it? If we have, then, as it says, that is something that we need to purge out. Tender-hearted. And the Greek for tender-hearted is eusplagnos. My Greek there? Eusplagnos. And it means well-compassioned, sympathetic, pitiful. Have we displayed qualities such as these to the brethren? Because, you know, as he's saying, this must be towards one another. So that in our interactions with one another, do we display this quality, which, as I say, represents the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. That is how Christ would have been with his disciples and apostles. Have we displayed this? Is this a constant thing that we display? Not that once in a while when we feel, however, we might act this way, but is it constant? Can somebody look at you and say, yes, he is this way? So if they hear something different, they say, nah, that isn't sounding like him. He is kind, he is sympathetic. He's a compassionate, or she is a compassionate person. He or she is pitiful. Is that reflected, and do we demonstrate this all the time, or most of the time? Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13. What we refer to as the love chapter. In my Bible here, it says in the rubric, the characteristics of love. And he says, though I speak with tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. So if I could speak every language known to men and go one step beyond, even speak the language that angels speak, but I don't have love, or I don't demonstrate love to my fellow men, I am become a sounding brass. You drop a piece of brass and it goes, and it goes bang. That is as much as I am become. For all the things that I would say, it is as worthless as the sound that a piece of brass makes if you drop it on the ground or if you knock it. Or a tinkling cymbal, the little things that we knock when we accompany music. When it's done, it's done. Nobody remembers that. It might be useful in the context of a performance of music, but once it's done, it's done. Nobody remembers a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can move mountains, and I don't have charity, I am nothing. So as they say, you can know the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. You can explain the 70-year prophecy and whatever, you know, that people find difficulty in the Bible. Even things that people don't understand, and you can explain all of these things perfectly. And you have all knowledge. You know everything about physics and chemistry and mathematics and computing, every science, you know everything. And you have all faith that you can say to the mountains, look, you know, move and go into the sea. Christ said if you had a little bit of faith, but you have all faith, so it's not a problem for you. And you don't have love. He is saying, I am nothing, or you are nothing. And do I bestow all my goods to feed the poor? And do I give my body to be burned? And I have no charity, it profiteth me nothing. You give all your goods to the poor. You give your body to be burned, but you still have leaven. You still have leaven. So you do all these things that seemingly on the surface will impress other people. Boy, this man good. You know, he's you know, as I went to a funeral recently, and I heard the people extolling a person in the village that nobody could pass by, and she would give this one food and would give this one that. But relatively few people turned out at the funeral from the village. Were mostly friends of the family and family members. But the people who she supposedly was the patron of would never allow a person to be hungry, etc. Lots of them didn't turn up. But Paul is saying, if you have these outward demonstrations of things that may appear to be righteous and godly, etc., but you don't really have love, you're not kind to one another, you don't, you know, you're not sympathetic, you're not compassionate towards one another, he says, you know, it profits you nothing. And the verses that I want to get to, verse 4, it says, charity suffers long. Do you suffer long, brother? And note what the words immediately follow it. And is kind. So if you have love, then you should be kind. They're linked. If you're not kind, then as he said, you're like sounding brass or tinkling cymbal. You're giving your body to be burned. You're giving, you know, you're giving all your goods to feed the poor. But you don't have love. So it's nothing. Charity envies not, vaunteth not itself. It doesn't seek to elevate itself above other people or to put down people. It's not puffed up like the unleavened bread. It's puffed up. It is unleavened. So it isn't puffed up. It's not the things that people want. You know, somebody gave us a package of hot cross buns and they puffed up. Yeah. We gave it away to a couple of other. By the way, we have to discard the remains. It's not like that. The love that he's talking about here is unleavened. Why is unleavened? Because it reflects Christ, who was none of these things. Christ wasn't puffed up. You know, he could tell a man who came to him, you know, Lord, my servant lies home sick, you know. That I will come and heal him. He said, no. You don't need to do that. I am not worthy that you should come under my roof. But you just say the word, and I know my servant is going to be healed. Because I am a man with authority. I tell this one, do this, he does it. I tell him, bring this, he brings it. I tell him, go, he goes. So, I believe that you can stay here and just say the word, and my servant will be healed. Christ said, I have not found this kind of faith among Israelitish people, Christian people. I didn't find this kind of faith. This man who doesn't know anything about me believes I could do this thing. He says, okay, as you wish. So it be done unto you according to your faith. And they said the man's servant was healed in that same moment. So that a person who could do this, wasn't puffed up, could take, how many years? 5 loaves and a couple of fishes and feed 10,000 people. And you have 12 baskets of fragments when it's done. Wasn't puffed up. Now, what do we do in our lives that could rival that in terms of doing anything? Even if we want to say that, okay, we're not doing it on our own. But the fact is, he did it. Nothing. So why are we puffed up then? Christ had experiences that none of us will perhaps ever experience in this life. Christ saw and spoke to angels. You know? Christ had the voice of a, well, it probably wasn't the Father himself, but he had a message directly from the Father. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. I know, not I am proud. I am well pleased, so don't be proud or anything. And to have the greatest being in the world give that affirmation before an entire crowd. But we see examples of this one, you know, my father is a minister in government, and therefore I am doing this, and you can't interfere with me, even if you're the police. We see that happening all the time. But Christ, who had all these things, was not puffed up, was unleavened, which is why we're commanded to be unleavened. It does not behave itself unseemly. Unseemly behavior is behavior that we deprecate. You know, it's ugly. It is, depending on the level you go, it could even be disgusting. But it is not behavior that you want to see replicated. It leaves everybody with a sour taste in their mouths. So if you have love, it says, love does not behave. It means not that the love itself doesn't behave. But if you have love, you should not and will not behave this way. Does not behave unseemly. Seeketh not her own. Is not easily provoked. Are you easily provoked, brethren? Many of us are. Why are we easily provoked? Primarily, one of the reasons is we tend to disregard others. So you're not easily provoked. Because it says it suffers long. So you're not easily provoked. Thinketh no evil. And this is not only that you don't think about evil as a mental or intellectual exercise, but you also don't think evil of others. You don't attribute negative things or evil things to other people when you don't know. You just think, well, this person acted this way and this is what the person meant. You don't know that for sure. Rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Again, what did Ephesians tell us? Put away the things that how did he says? Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you. So as he says, charity does not rejoice in these things, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things. Not that you believe everything that people say, but you believe all things that God says. Hopes all things, endures all things. It says charity never fails, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail or they will come to fulfillment. Not that the prophecy will not happen, but the prophecy will come to an end at some point in time. It will be fulfilled. And so when it's fulfilled, then nothing more happens. So he says it will fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. All the various languages will cease, because the Bible says that God will give mankind one speech, that they could all speak to God and give them a pure language. And someone says in an argument that, the Bible never said that he will get rid of languages, but since there is no language on the face of the earth that can be considered pure, if he's going to give you a pure language, then it means it cannot be one of these languages. You can't sanitize them. They will forever have these things in them. And even if you say, okay, you could have some of the words that corrupt languages eventually fall out of use. The point is, it's still a part of the language. You may not have it as active use. I mean, some of the vulgarities that we use today, in the initial, when the words initially were used, had a totally different meaning to what we use them today. But they have become corrupted in the language, and so there are words that we don't use in public, as they say. You can't use certain words over the public broadcast media. You can't publish certain words in reputable newspapers and certain magazines, etc. You don't put it, of course, in your church literature, but maybe 500-600 years ago you could. So a pure language removes all of these things. He says, whether there be tongues, but these different languages, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. And then he goes on in verse 13, he says, and now abides faith, hope, and charity, these three. But the greatest of these is charity, or love. So we see how these things are linked to unleavened and leavened bread. Let's go to Romans chapter 12 and see what it says. And let's read from verse 9. It says, let love be without dissimulation. And dissimulation, as they say, is to dissemble, which means to hide your true feelings. So you smile, but you really have very negative feelings toward the person. As the Jamaican expression says, all keen teeth not laugh. So you smile and you display your teeth in a smile, but that don't mean that you really have any affection with the person. So let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. And note, verse 10. Be kindly affection one to another with brotherly love. Why be kindly affection to one another? Partly because when we become spirit beings now, this is how we will interact with one another. When in a sense it doesn't really matter, because spirit beings' feelings don't get hurt like that. So if then, when you're relatively immune to these things, you're going to act that way, why not now, when it matters more? So be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor preferring one another. Now, the New Living Translation says, and this is kind of illuminating, don't just pretend that you love one another. Don't pretend that you love them. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Have the mind of Christ. Have the mind of Christ, and let each esteem the other better than self. But love one another with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. Now, that goes against the grain. If someone else gets lifted up, we're upset because we are not lifted up. Why is that? But Paul's command is in honor, preferring one another. And we should have the mind of Christ, brethren. Now let's turn to Philippians chapter 2 and see how that mind, again, read how it was reflected. Philippians chapter 2, and let's read let's go from verse 2. He says, fulfill you my joy, that you be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Verse 3. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem the other better than himself. So that when we get together, brethren, to do activities or what have you, he says, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem the other better than himself. And as I said before, if you esteem somebody to be better than you, the likelihood of you offending somebody you think is better than you is very slim. You will not go and insult the president or the prime minister or even the minister of government if you work in the public service. I don't think you're going to be rude to the minister or the permanent secretary. Why? Can't the minister or the permanent secretary get you upset? But you will not be. You won't be rude to the person. Why? Because, at least for the moment, you esteem the person to be better than you. This is the president, this is the permanent, the PS. You know, you can't do that. You can't offend your principal if you're in school, you know. You can't offend the head of your department where... Now, you could go in the back somewhere and cuss him out, you know, with your friends, etc. That's okay. But you don't do it in his presence. So this is what he's asking us to do. Esteem others better than yourself. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. And verse 5, he says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, what did he do? Was he puffed up? No, he humbled himself. Even though he knew, I am God. I can call my Father and he will give me 10,000 angels. Or how many legions he said it was. I could get 10,000 angels now. I just had to ask. But he humbled himself. He didn't do it. He could have wiped away the hordes who came to arrest him. But he didn't. He humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross, which is an ignominious death. Humiliated in every fashion. Why? Because he was not puffed up. And this is what the days of unleavened bread, brethren, are intended to show to us. To get out the leaven that puffs us up, meaning the sins and the psychological and the attitudes, etc. Get these out of you, so that you could become like Christ, who even when he faced death, he humbled himself. You know, he took upon him the form of a servant, and being found as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. And so, brethren, as we examine ourselves, at least if we haven't put it away, at least we can now begin to think about some of the things that we need to put away, so that we could start the process of being a new lump. Next time, we will take a look at Passover and some of the deep implications of what that symbolizes for us. So, brethren, let us strive to be